You know those trust falls where one person stands behind another and falls into his partner's waiting arms? I did it once with my father. Maybe I was 12. First, he caught me, no problem. Then we switched. As my dad let himself fall back, I realized a 12-year-old can't catch a grown man. But my father had no such concerns. I'll never forget his blind trust as he fell toward me. Instead of actually catching him, I ended up kind of guiding him to the floor as gently as I could. When I was the one trusting, I made a reasonable guess I could trust my dad. But my dad fully committed to trusting me from the get-go. No consideration at all about the physics involved. Where did that trust come from? We generally believe that we earn trust. We come to trust people through repeated experiences with them. Experiences in which they demonstrate their trustworthiness. Trust grows over time with repeated exposure. We lose trust in the exact opposite way. One incident can destroy decades of it. Coming in, trust may be slow growth, but going out, it's crash and burn. What about the times when we trust implicitly as my dad trusted me? We can understand this implicit trust by looking at two very different examples, doctors and valet parking attendants. Yeah, implicit trust makes sense with doctors. We go to them in a hospital or an established medical office, and usually it's someone's recommendation. They don't just stand under a sun umbrella on a street corner waiting for us to drive up to them the way valet attendants do. Yet we never hesitate to hand over our car keys implicitly trusting a valet attendant without a thought. We don't investigate the valet company, we don't ask how long the attendant has been working for them. Usually we can't get away from our car fast enough to even ask the valet's name. We just hand over the keys and we don't think about it again until we try to remember where we put the claim ticket. That's implicit trust if I ever saw it. Kind of like the trust my dad gave me. Trust fills the gap between what we know and what we need or want. No matter how well we've researched a doctor, we don't know for sure if she can help us. But we need medical care. We trust that she can give it appropriately. And we need to trust the valet if we want to make our lunch on time. Trust binds us together as human beings. Every human relationship depends on some amount of trust. And the amount of trust in each relationship determines its quality. Acknowledging this gives us a tool for evaluating the relationships in our lives. We can understand the strength of our best relationships based on the extent of mutual trust within it. And I think we can see the gaps in trust dragging down our most challenging relationships. Trust also gives us a tool to evaluate ourselves. We can ask ourselves a series of honest questions. How trustworthy am I in my relationships? Have I been untrustworthy at times, contributing to the difficulty in my harder relationships? How honest have I been about my lapses, either with myself or with the other person? And how much can I trust myself? If someone betrayed my trust, did I just ignore it or did I stand up for me? Although no one likes confrontation, we cannot be fully honest with another person if we ignore something he did. If we do, we retain a wound the other person may know nothing about, yet that affects how we behave in the relationship. We can't help but be more guarded or careful and certainly less trusting. Over time, the other person senses the change but has no idea why. He, in turn, learns to trust us less as well. A married man in a circle I lead once had a one-night stand with another woman, which he immediately regretted and soon confessed to his wife. Sometime later, his wife also had a fling, which he discovered. This man mourned the loss of trust he had inflicted first on his marriage, one of the many wounds he and his wife suffered from these incidents. He wanted to return to a full partnership with her, built on mutual openness that comes from complete trust. This man knows that we build trust in relationships through our actions toward the other person, but that being trustworthy starts with us. Trustworthiness begins with our personal commitment to it. Internally, we set a term or a context for how we will behave towards others. we must then follow through on that term or context. This man sat down with his wife and told her he wanted to leave the past behind and work to have the relationship he desired with her. He made a commitment to himself and his wife to be trustworthy and transparent, and he asked her to do the same. Her trust in him has grown as she's seen his actions match his words. And she too has been more revealing about matters she previously kept hidden. This man recognized that the willingness to extend trust begins on the inside. He knew betrayals shatter trust, and that he and his wife each risked being hurt again. But this man made a deliberate choice to trust, and more importantly, to be vulnerable, because he wanted a trusting marriage, regardless of the mistakes he and his wife had each made. That was his essential term for his marriage. His personal commitment to rebuilding trust was his expression of the hope they could fulfill that standard. Making changes like this man made can be hard. My video, How Anything You Want to Do Begins with Willingness, will give you a tool to do the hard things. Check it out and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. But what happens when we overgeneralize our wounds and assume that because one person wounded us, everyone similar to that person will likely wound us as well? We might find ourselves unwilling to trust anyone, ever, even when the facts on the ground suggest we have every reason to trust that person. When we overgeneralize our distrust, we find it harder to begin new relationships. Or, if we can begin them, we may find they inevitably hit a point beyond which they can't progress. They become blocked, and we miss out on the emotional depth with another person we could achieve. Conversely, instead of trusting too rarely, some of us repeatedly extend trust too easily. We offer our trust before the person has truly earned it, and before we've received an equal amount of trust from him or her. We do this because we think it will make someone like us. Then, when we eventually find our trust violated, I think we can take a certain sad comfort in the repetition of becoming the victim once again. This all too common pattern leads to 3 different ends. First, because we can now blame the other person for violating the trust we extended, we avoid any ownership or responsibility for failure of that relationship. Second, we now have a whole bunch of blame we can use to try to manipulate the other person. We have something we can use to try to guilt him or her into doing what we want. And third, this over-trusting pattern becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We will always be alone. Early in a relationship, we may extend trust as a plea for intimacy or as a way to bind people to us. But what starts on its face as a way to build intimacy ends up preventing us from having it if we skip over the much more difficult work of building a relationship. We don't build the true mutual vulnerability that is the core of our deepest relationships. Instead, we remain in a state of false intimacy based on unearned trust. When the other person does inevitably violate our trust and we end the relationship, we spare ourselves a deeper hurt from the ending of a full relationship because the other person only got as close as we allowed him or her. Even though we believed we allowed the person in pretty far, our over-trusting ensured we always retained control of the intimacy. And when the relationship blew up, we confirmed our belief that we will always be alone. We may also extend trust beyond what may be warranted as a way to make up for the other person's lack of commitment to our relationship. We may be doing their work for them. We may so fear losing the relationship that we use trust to paper over the gaps between us. We may not believe we deserve the other person's full commitment and reliability, so we settle for less. We trust that the other person cares for us rather than confirming it. And we may do this because, worst of all, we may trust ourselves the least. We may not trust ourselves as strong and independent people who could survive a true reckoning with the other person over the failings of the relationship. You might want to check out my video on building dynamic relationships if you want some quick ideas on how to strengthen yours. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please go ahead and do so. And if you like this video, please hit like. I think about my father's complete faith in me in the trust fall. His trust grew out of his belief that I could do anything, that I was eminently capable of everything. He would have had to let go of his idea of me to see the real me standing there. A 12-year-old likely incapable of catching someone who outweighed him by at least 75 pounds. My father's blind trust blocked information contradicting his image of me. Certainly, parents exist to see the best in their children, to see capabilities the rest of the world may not see, to be their children's #1 advocate. And I am grateful my father thought too much of me rather than too little. But even in that intimate and complicated space between parents and children and parents, at some point, trust must give way to honesty and truth. My father so wanted connection with me, he feared my displeasure if he told me he didn't trust me to catch him. Our trust fall taught me we need to acknowledge when we place our trust appropriately and when we do not. And we may not be able to do that until we fully trust ourselves. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you like this video, go ahead and hit like. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mark Rothman Progress Coach. You can check out my website at markcoach.net, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the like if you liked the video. Definitely leave a comment. I really like replying and knowing what you think. And then you can find a link below to my website, markcoach.net. On Instagram, I'm Mark Progress Coach, and Facebook is Mark Rothman Progress Coach. And I'll see you in the next video.